The power to persuade in World War I. Propaganda was the main reason so many people approved of World War I for so long. Even though most people would never want to go to war, propaganda was used to unite the people, enlist armies, and demonize the enemies. Propaganda not only caused the citizens to support the war, but made them want to continue it until they won. Why was this? The people were persuaded to believe they needed to be at war and felt justified. The dictionary defines propaganda as information, ideas, or rumors deliberately spread widely to help or harm a person, group, movement, institution, nation, etc. The word propaganda became well known during World War I, but the idea has been around for many years. Propaganda materialized right before World War I as a way to manipulate and persuade citizens to join the cause and support the war. Before people would approve of the war, they had to rationalize it. Governments would fill the minds of their citizens with the information needed for them to rationalize the war. Propaganda methods were practiced with the scientific approach by Walter Lippmann, a journalist, and Edward Bernay, a psychologist. Lippmann and Bernay both worked for the Committee of Public Information, also known as the Creel Committee, which was designed by the president at the time to guide the U.S. citizens to favor the British. The pro-war propaganda worked in creating anti-German sentiment, causing everybody to think the Germans were monsters and making them want to go to war and stay at war and defeat them. Propaganda was used to build armies. There were different tactics used to get American men to enlist, along with other countries using the same tactics. Some propaganda implied that soldiers would be considered heroes if they enlisted. Others would just try to guilt trip citizens into joining. Another tactic aimed at men was using pictures of young females on posters to entice the men to join. Some propaganda used motion pictures showing Americans being invaded right on their own soil and images of monsters taking over America. Involvement of children on posters was a tactic that worked to pull at the heartstrings of adults and appeal to children. Children are thought of as the future of the country, and using propaganda to catch their attention would instill patriotism in them. With so many of the men at war, women had to work outside of the home. Many new jobs were created due to the war, and they needed people to fill them. Jobs were also left by many men that went to fight the war, and women had to fill those also. Propaganda was used to encourage women to take these jobs by depicting women in manual labor roles that only men once held. It was also a step forward for women's equality. During World War I, all over the world was in a food shortage. Many farmers became soldiers, leaving no one left to do the farming, and food prices began to skyrocket. There was not enough food to go around, and many people could not afford to eat. Another issue was trading and transporting because ships were in danger of being sunk. The government used propaganda to urge Americans to conserve food and change their habits. America had the largest supply of food at the time, and the president wanted to conserve the food for shipment overseas. Exporting tripled in America during World War I. Propaganda was used by the Germans to gain compassion from other disengaged countries. Even though the Allies had power over the land and the sea communications, the Germans were able to set up a powerful radio station in which the airwaves had the ability to go all the way to Mexico. The Germans were very clever and their effect was working. One of the generals in Mexico created a postcard with a poem on it stating Mexico would win if they ever went to war with America. The Germans' intentions of using propaganda to win over neutral countries was working. They would report all of their victories and vilify the Allies to make them look bad. The Allies were not innocent because they too were altering the news and reporting it. Everyone was obsessed with making the other look bad. It was needed to keep the people in favor of the war and donating. Germany was upset that some of their citizens had recently migrated to the United States. One form of propaganda they used was a postcard with a poem called Westward Ho! This is an interesting piece that aims to make German Americans feel like traitors. Imagine how German Americans felt, worried and scared about their family members in a war zone. It also had to be tough being in a new country and viewed as a traitor. Propaganda did not just come in the form of posters and postcards. It was incorporated into everyday items like playing cards. The cards had faces of all the major players in the war. Propaganda was embedded into the commercial advertising like cigarette ads to deliver information and sway the beliefs of the population. The war was embedded in everything. It was seen and talked about everywhere. People would start off disagreeing with the war, but after seeing so much and hearing so much of what their government wanted, they started to agree and believe in it. Through propaganda, the government not only changed minds, but also got their citizens jumping on the bandwagon. Propaganda was not a new thing, but with the new technology, it became such a huge part of this war. It was basically a manipulation weapon. Propaganda films were also created and released during this time period. Television and internet had not been invented at the time of this war, so motion pictures were used to get in the minds of people. The governments had to make their people believe what they wanted them to believe. Propaganda, just like people, has changed through the times, and World War I was just the beginning of manipulation of the masses by governments. Looking at all the propaganda from this war and seeing everything that each country thought about each other is a little scary. When at war, the opposing force is always the bad guy, but each side believes the other is the bad guy. Is this because of propaganda? What information is being fed to civilians by their governments today? What's being left out? What are citizens being told so they want to fight against the bad guy? This definitely still happens, and on a greater scale in today's world. It would be nice to have the full picture, but then again, maybe the citizens couldn't handle it.